What is happening, people? Welcome to the Scarfey Talks Premier League podcast. In this episode, then, we'll be reviewing every Premier League club season so far across all competitions. At the time of recording, we've got 7 games to go, and it is the international break, a perfect time to summarise what we've seen. And also in future episodes, we will be looking at what's to come. But ultimately, 2026, some teams' fortunes have changed, some have stayed the same. Let's get straight into it and introduce my 2 guests that join me tonight. Firstly, Louis, thank you for your time. West Ham fan. I mean, talk about roller coaster of seasons. I mean, you've absolutely been and seen some real lows, and also more recently seen some highs in 2026. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm looking forward to it. It's been an interesting season so far. Some games to go, but a lot of entertainment. We'll talk about it all.
Absolutely will. Louis, thank you. Matt, great to have you on as well. Arsenal supporter, full of highs this year. Lows of losing in the Carabao Cup final, but generally highs. How are you?
Yeah, good. We've had, a very, very strong season. I just hope that we can, end very strongly as well with still 3 competitions to play for.
Absolutely in a very good position. Quadruple thoughts of that is over, but I would say it's never really realistic. Still in a really strong situation. I think if I said to you now, Matt, and any Arsenal fan, you could win the treble and Tottenham go down, I think it would have taken that before a ball was kicked, and you'd absolutely take that now. But let's get straight into it then. And we are going to start at the bottom and work our way up. We'll start with Wolverhampton Wanderers. If focus on the Premier League, they sit 20th with 17 points on the board with 31 played. And in terms of where they sit as well from the relegation zone, they sit 13 points. All played the same now. So Wolves are no longer in that position where they played one more because they didn't play this weekend with their postponed game. And also they didn't do too bad in the cup competitions. Louis, I'll start with you. What have you made of Wolves? A significant improvement, it'd be fair to say, wouldn't it? Under Rob Edwards. Louis gone, so I'll just divert that question to you, Matt. What have you made of Wolves under Rob Edwards?
Wolves at the start of the season were a team that I wasn't expecting them to be that bad, and it got to a point where they could have been the worst Premier League team to ever play in the Premier League because it was that bad in terms of the points, results, and performances that they were putting in. And I don't really know what sort of triggered their sort of not resurgence, because they're still going to get relegated, but their upturn in form. Maybe it's the manager change, but I swear they changed 3 managers or 2 managers. And Rob Edwards, look, this is just my opinion, right? But I'm actually glad that it didn't work out for him at Wolves. I'm glad that he got the boot, because I didn't like the fact that he jumped ship from Middlesbrough to Wolves because of a Premier League opportunity. He should have stuck with his, former club and, tried to get into the Premier League. I kind of think it's a bit of karma for Rob Edwards for the way that he treated his former club. But in terms of Wolves, in the second half of the campaign, they've actually been pretty decent in terms of they're not one of the worst sides in the Premier League. I believe on form in the second half of the season, they're around 15th, 16th. So they're not the worst team, but still mid-table. But they're still expected to go down, of course, because they're bottom of the league.
They are, but I think Rob Edwards remain in charge in the Championship, and I think they've got still, I think Wolves will be okay, put it that way. I think they'll be straight back up, and I think they're built as a club. So it's never nice going down, but I think they're in an okay position. Louis, on Burnley then, under Scott Parker, I mean, ultimately, for so many weeks now, we've been going, they need to get a result if they want to stay up, they need to get a result if they want to get up. They haven't, got that result. Occasional, draw, for example, at Stamford Bridge, that was a huge one, but never been able to really build on that. Not many wins, if any, at all. So what have you made of Burnley? Are they down for you?
I believe as of late, I think this is probably one of Burnley's better seasons in the Premier League. And they've really put up a fight this season. I feel we looked at them in some of the games and think, right, this Burnley side might have a bit about it, but in a few weeks they've fallen a little bit short, which is a big shame for them. I think they've got a good side, and I think they maybe came in a little bit underprepared, but they came in with a fight to take on. And it's not really transpired to be the fight that they would have hoped. Maybe they would have liked to be in a position of where Leeds are. They both finished on the championship, same amount of points last season. So they probably looked at, but they've taken Leeds and they've not held it out. They've not held it through.
What I would just say on Burnley as well is the thing that's really impressed me this season that I've not seen from Burnley, I don't think ever in the Premier League, in my opinion, is the amount of goals that they've scored. It's actually been pretty decent this season, because if you compare it to, you know, some Premier League sides, you look at Everton in 8th place, who, you know, might even get European football with the way that they're playing and the results that they're picking up, is they've scored 37 goals. Burnley have scored 33 goals. Now, I don't actually think that that's that bad for, you know, a team in 19th place, you know, and you're comparing it to teams that are pushing for European football. You know, they're only just a couple of goals behind them. But I think where they've lacked quite dramatically and sort of the worst in the league is their defense and their goalkeeper, in that they've conceded 61 goals. They could be on for conceding 70 goals this season. And I think that that's probably the sticky point for Burnley, is if they maybe shored up their defense, they might have actually stayed up, because they've got, you know, a decent midfield and they've got, you know, a decent attack, it seems.
100%. I totally agree with that. I think you put that really nicely. Louis, if I can stay with you, because your club is next in West Ham, feel, you know, free to talk longer about this one, what you made of West Ham, the job that Nuno's doing, because I think ultimately, tell me if I'm wrong, but you're in a lot better position now than you were a few months ago, for example, before Nuno coming to the club, or even the early days of Nuno.
Well, at the start of the season, we had a very tricky season. Coming back off a window we spent quite a lot in, brought in certain reinforcements, but those reinforcements were for Graham Potter, who obviously received a sack, the club deemed. But I feel that this season has had loads of ups and downs. In the more recent times, we looked like we had a fight. At one point, I think it was around January 3rd, we'd lost to Wolves, their first win of the season, lost 3-0, and there was about a 10-point gap to safety, and a lot of people wrote the season off for us and said, that's us done now. We now come here in, you know, end of March, 1 point away from safety, and people are now disappointed that we lost to Aston Villa. It goes to show the progression we made as a side this season. And, you know, we went from unacceptable results from a relegation candidate to a side in the top four, and we're now disappointed at losing it, mainly because of, well, obviously the result, but also the side. It goes to show the progression Nuno's made under the same side, with not really too many reinforcements coming in January. Pablo, Tati, they've been brilliant for us. Individuals, Somerville, Bowen, they've dug deep. Fernandez, there's been so many players that have, pretty much the entire squad really, have been huge, humongous positives for us. And their fight that they've come together, credit to the board as well for signing the likes of Tati, Pablo. That's pretty much put us in a position of safety. Beforehand, we were relying on Callum Wilson week in, week out. And whilst he's a top player, it evidently wasn't the style that Nuno was hoping for. Brought in an assistant manager, another coach, and all of a sudden we changed our season round to at least give us a hope of survival. Of course, 7 games to go. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know who's going to go down. But what we can say is we're giving it a good go, rather than being written off with 6 to 7 game weeks to go. So I'm happy that I'm really, really happy we're giving it a go.
Louis, thank you very much for that on your own club. If I come to you, Matt, for the next club, which is Tottenham, now have fallen to 17th. I'll do my absolute best to stay quiet on this one. Of course, talk about your North London rivals really struggling, and ultimately at this moment, I think are heading for the Championship unless something changes.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to take many positives, I guess, from the position that Tottenham are in. I think, you know, if we go back to the start of the season, you know, it was actual quite plain sailing for Thomas Frank in terms of the results he was getting in. But I always mentioned him. I've got a North London rivalry group chat, and I always mentioned in there that you're picking up results, but you need to back this up with performances. And to that day, I still haven't seen a proper Tottenham performance. I guess, maybe that Crystal Palace game was probably that performance, but one good, very good performance in, a whole season is really, really bad. But I also think, we need to take into account the amount of severe injuries that Tottenham have picked up. To lose Maddison, to lose Kulusevski, I think there was another long-term one just before the start of the season. To lose those players before the season had kicked off, I think was a blow. And when you signed Xavi Simons, I thought he was going to be dangerous. He was going to be a very, very electric player in terms of, he'd be very energetic. He'd be very, give me the ball type player. And I just haven't seen that from him. And I'm not putting, all of the blame on him, not at all. I think if we're talking positives on Tottenham, I definitely think Archie Gray has been a positive in that he's probably been maybe not your player this season, but probably been a player that has stepped up in most games than not. And I think with the players I'm about to mention in Van der Ven and Romero, who have actually been scoring most of your goals, they've really dropped off of late. Like, they've really disappointed. They've actually really costing you a lot of points in games.
They're the worst at the moment. They're so unreliable, and it's just been unlike them. We've been worse with them here.
So I don't understand. So I don't know who you would go for your player of the season. But if I was going to pick one, I think it would have to be sort of like Archie Gray, mainly because he's been the most consistent performer. He may not be the best performer, but he's been the most consistent one and probably the most mature one out of the lot. And, we're heading into the final part of the season. Can Tottenham survive? I think it's going to be very difficult because the game that you played last, which was the Forest game at home, I thought that would determine whether Spurs have the fight to win this relegation battle. And I just don't think they do. I don't think they do. I think the players really lack that sort of mental side, in that they just don't realize that they're in a relegation battle mentally. I think teams that are like West Ham, Burnley, they're
all fighting.
Yeah, and it's no offense to them, but they are used to these sort of games and what they mean to them in
100%.
It's their wages next season I'm on the line. And I think with Tottenham players, they might take that for granted and not think about that side of things. But it's been a very disappointing season for Tottenham. But yeah.
Yeah, 100%. No, I totally agree with that. I'll just add on, if Tudor departs, then Tottenham have to get a managerial appointment right, and that's not even me giving an opinion. Just
There's been talks of a player-manager type role. No, I don't know if that's BS or taking the piss. I have no clue. But is it actually a thing?
Well,
that's
really
the thing. There's a video,
and there's a video going around, and this just links in with that they're so out of touch, right? Video going around of the 2 or 3 members of the board laughing after we lost 3-0 against Forest. Of course, you hope anyway they're not laughing about the game, but just come on. I mean, in front of the fans as well, knowing that you're going to be recorded because you're under pressure. Things that I just think they're totally out of touch beyond belief. And talking to fans today, some are like, "Oh yes, brilliant, Ryan Mason's good for his coaching experience." I personally don't get who it's good for, who it upsets. Tottenham have to stay in the Premier League. Do you know what? We could have 1% of the ball and have shot that's an own goal or even count as a shot. I don't care. We have to get the results over the line. And as fans, we need to stop this thing of playing a certain way. We just have to get a result over the line. Louis, if I come to you though on Nottingham Forest, who beat Tottenham 3-0, huge for them, first Premier League win under Victor Pereira. That'll give them confidence, won't it? And what have you made of their season so far? 4 managers, Bolton, all of them still have pretty much been in a relegation battle. Some would say Nuno, not when he left them, but ever since they've pretty much fallen down.
Yeah, as you mentioned, obviously the 4 managers in one season is already quite chaotic, to say the least. But they had a very large window going into Europe, which people thought would be the Conference League, obviously upgraded to the Europa League after Palace's deemed exit from UEFA. And they're now into the quarterfinals, I believe, Nottingham Forest. So they've got their matchup against Porto whilst in this relegation fight, and probably the side now that people believe will likely probably stay up out of West Ham, Forest and Leeds after victory at Spurs. Of course, it's a bit premature to decide, but from social media and seeing what's going on, it almost does feel that they are the favourites to stay up. They've had a topsy-turvy season. I'm sure their fans will understand, obviously, the only way they will be into Europe next season is by winning the Europa League, which will be quite a large task. But it's not to say it's not doable. Of course not. And they'll be disappointed at this season, I think. They've had a few bad injuries. It's not helped them. But obviously that stint, those, I think it was 8 games under Ange, really, really hurt them. Because they went from where Nuno took them temporarily in a European slot position around there, with this new side. I remember watching Crystal Palace versus Nottingham Forest, a few opening games of the season. And people saw that game as a massive, it was almost like a rivalry because it seemed like the 2 outsiders to potentially get Europe this year at the beginning of the season. That's now changed. But I think they'll be disappointed, but they'll look at the Premier League and not look forward to it. But then they look at their European run as a side who, we won the Conference League whilst we were fighting relegation in the Premier League. I vividly remember I didn't really care about the Premier League. I was just very focused on Europe. So I'm sure their fans feel the same at the moment. I'm probably quite happy with how things are going as long as they stay up.
Absolutely, that if is the key here. Matt, if I come to you then, Leeds United, completely different side in recent months under Daniel Farke. Having said that, though, a lot of draws and frustrating results recently, not being able to get the win. They always say, don't they, that someone gets dragged back into a relegation battle. Could that be Leeds United? But on the other hand, if they get a win, you just feel like that they're okay or they're in a very nice position. But don't want to talk too much about what's to come, to be fair. What you've made of Leeds so far?
Yeah, look, just really quickly, it kind of feels like that moment when Crystal Palace beat Tottenham. It felt that win had secured them, secured their place in the Premier League. I think it's sort of the same situation with Leeds United, even though that they are 6 points off of Crystal Palace. I still think a win would just secure their place essentially. But I actually think that for the first half of the season, they struggled. They struggled. On the second game week, they got battered by Arsenal 5-0, and from there they just kept on getting worse and worse and worse. But I think it was around December, January time, Farke changed some tactics, and whatever he did really was starting to work. They might not have been getting many wins, but they weren't losing many games, and I think that was quite key. But in terms of of recent games, it does seem like they've hit a slump a little because they're winless in 5 games, in their last 5 games. And I think, just if they can get that one positive win, I think that they've secured their place, personally.
Okay, yeah, absolutely, and that's what's on the line for Leeds. And I just feel like the home form at Ellen Road, or they're just just Ellen Road as a whole, will push them over the line. Look at Tottenham and haven't won a Premier League home game since the 6th of December. I just think they're clubs like Forest and Leeds that are going to do so much better at home. West Ham as well. I mean, Louis will be able to speak for that, if he wants to add on, but home form maybe an issue a little bit as well for West Ham. Certainly has been at the past. That could be an advantage in particular to someone like a Leeds. Louis, I will come to you anyway because Crystal Palace are 14th. Really strange season for them. A lot happening. I think Palace fans need a long break and a long holiday after this season. With Glasner departing, it just feels like, it feels like he's left already in my mind. This doesn't feel like his Palace team, if I'm being honest, to look a shadow of the former selves. And to be fair, they've now got a squad that they've got the numbers and they've got the quality, which is he's been calling for. Although it's taken a long while, it is here now, and it feels like he's not been able to utilise that. So what have you made of Palace so far? I mean, 1 minute they're up here, 1 minute they're down there, but right now in 14th place, can they get to their favourite 12th position?
I mean, we talk about their fans needing a break. I tell you what, the ownership certainly won't be having a break over summer. There'll be a lot of phone calls being made. They've got a lot to do, a whole lot to do. And I'm sure a lot of players will come in and a lot of players will be sold. It will be a transition period for Crystal Palace. I've already said this before, I think, about Crystal Palace in saying that they'll be disappointed in the fact they finally got themselves into Europe with a very good side. And they've not been able to capitalise on it. They've not been able to build on it. It's a bit like when Brighton got Europe for that one season. And you could almost, look at them and say they got that European campaign and they unfortunately weren't able to build on it. Consistently get Europe year in, year out, or at least maybe into a lower competition. Crystal Palace didn't get that Europa League they were hoping for, into the Conference League, and still have a good chance of winning it. That will be their way to develop. If they could perhaps win the Conference League, that gets them Europa League, obviously, but that means they'll be getting a new manager with European money, Premier League money, maybe sell a player here or there. Suddenly, they'll be looking in quite a good position again to kickstart their season and go all out. I mean, we're talking about Glasner had this Palace side about top 4 for quite a lot of the season, in and around that European spot. It almost seemed destined they were going to get Europe. People weren't talking about would they get Europe. They were talking about which European competition they'd be going in. Then, miraculously, 2 months later, people were having conversations, could there be an outside team to have the drop? This was before the January window. It goes to show that them not being as consistent as they would have hoped has really hurt themselves, and they've almost shot themselves in the foot, probably, if you want to put it like that. As you say, Harry, it does almost feel as if Glasner has left. He's moved on, and I mean, personally, if I was a Palace fan, I would have wanted to get a new manager in early on, just so he can get used to the club, see who he does and doesn't want. But Palace thought against it otherwise, and again, a bit like Nottingham Forest, their happiness and hope is relied on a European competition, not necessarily the Premier League.
Absolutely that, Louis. I will stick with you and move on to the next club above Palace, which is Bournemouth, 3 points above, who have played 31 games like everyone else, but have 42 points. The last 5 games have been draws, and they're, unbeaten wise, their record's very, very good, one of the best in the Premier League, but play a different way. A lot less goals conceded, but a lot less scored. It feels like they've improved defensively, which is important that they did, but they've lost their ability to an extent going forward. What have you made of them and this new style under Iriola? And everyone looked at Iriola and went, you're an attacking manager, you're not going to change. And he's kind of put 2 fingers up, and they have changed, but they haven't really gone anywhere, even despite them shouting about their unbeaten form.
No, they haven't, admittedly, but they're close. I think this is one of those things where you need to look at Iriola and say, you've found a really good tactic to neutralise opponents, evidently. We found a tactic that's got us 5 consistent draws on the bounce against quite tough oppositions, I'd say. So you look at that and think, how can we nick a goal here and there and convert those draws into wins just by a goal only? It makes you think that a transfer window is required, but then you ask the bigger question in the wider perspective, is Iriola going to be there next season? There are limited reports, there's loads of rumours, but in terms of genuine facts, we don't really know. It's going to be an interesting period for Bournemouth. I think they've built a very good side under Iriola, one that's very consistent, very all-round. They've negotiated well with injuries and player losses, etc., especially with their last season clearance. I still think they have a lot of money to invest back into the squad. But question is, will it be Iraola running the team? Because this is his side. I think people would have hoped, Bournemouth fans would have hoped that maybe they could have nicked Europe after their last year performance. Never say never, given that there's still quite a lot of games left. But I think at this moment in time, there are probably other teams that feel as if they would. You feel as if they would be ahead for those European spots. Bournemouth, it almost feels Bournemouth playing for prize money at this point. But again, never say never. But I think there's been a few games this season they'll be disappointed in.
I agree with that. Thank you, Matt. Newcastle are the club that sit above them in 12th position, but on the same points. This is the real congested part of the table where there's like 2 points in, like if we go all the way up to like 7th. So, it's really, really tightly congested. But in Newcastle's case, when someone says inconsistent, they're the first club, and I mean this, that pop into my head. They get a huge result or they play really well, and then like so many goals conceded, they look really poor, and of course were pushed aside in the second leg of the Champions League against Barcelona, and you're really competitive in the first leg. And it felt, didn't it, when Barcelona got that late goal in that first leg, they would come back to regret that, and I think that made the position really difficult. But then losing to Sunderland has increased the pressure on Eddie Howe. I personally think he's under huge pressure in the summer, whether he's the manager to continue or not. I don't think he will. But what have you made of Newcastle this season? I think it's fair to say that I hoped for better, the Geordie fans.
I think Newcastle, to be honest, this might be an interesting take, but I think Newcastle have been one of the most surprising teams this season in terms of how inconsistent they've been, the performances they put in, the fact that they've lost both derbies against Sunderland, home and away, which is absolutely embarrassing for Newcastle fans and for the football club, because Sunderland were in the Championship last season. And I think the fact that they're out of all competitions, apart from the Premier League, has been a disaster, really. They got absolutely obliterated in the Champions League, but by Barcelona. They got obliterated by Man City in both the Carabao Cup and the FA Cup. It's been a very, very disappointing season for Newcastle, and I wouldn't be surprised if Eddie Howe was given his marching orders, because I think I don't see a world how he can lead Newcastle next season with what has happened this season. 13 losses for Newcastle, and we've still got 7 games to go, and I just think that there's going to be more and more L's incoming for Newcastle, because that derby loss is going to hurt the fans, the players, and the club, the staff, everything connected to Newcastle. That game is going to really hurt because of the manner of how they lost it, in the dying minutes of the game. And I don't, fear for them, in terms of relegation, because I don't think it will get to that point. But I fear that they're going to be a team that just lingers around, 8th to 12th, and that doesn't really kick on. I don't really think their ownership are as ambitious as people once thought.
Spent a lot of money, though.
They have spent a lot of money, and I think that was the genuine fear from clubs and from rival fans, that with that, pure spend, that they would buy world-class players and they will be kind of like a Man City, 2.0. But it really hasn't gone that way. And I do wonder whether their owners are thinking of jumping ship.
Interesting. That's a bold claim, though. We'll have to see what does happen. Before we move on, then, we've got someone listening in the YouTube chat, listening live, in fact, Newcastle fan in Ryan. Big up to him. Hope you're having a good day. He says Newcastle have had a terrible season, played it well a few times this year against big teams, lost numerous games against teams that should have been beaten. I mean, just comes to mind the amount of times they've lost to City, for example. He goes on to say 22 points lost from winning positions. Ouch, that is not good. Going on to say that for him, Elanga and Wissa have been disastrous. Signings, Eddie's lineup selections have been questionable at best. His in-game tactics are dreadful, and he appears to have no clue what the derby actually means. His final comment is, if you watch even some of his games, he panics and just throws people in random positions. I do agree from that with an outsider. Going on to say, Baltimore is quality and Eddie's misuse of him is criminal. I mean, Gordon, I think, is a really good player, and I love his versatility to play the 9 role. But when you've got 2 strikers, throw one of them in there, surely. And the other day, Lewis Hall's at right back. I mean, what's that about? Play players in your best position. Again, I think the goalkeeping situation, I think he's got that totally wrong, if I'm honest, and just little things like that. And like you say to Dan Burn, go and step in with Yamin Lamau, you've got a problem immediately. That's just not anybody, any of us would not suggest to do that. Man-to-man mark is one thing, but not against Barcelona and Yamal. Matt, did you want to say something?
I do just want to touch upon Walter Marder. I haven't been impressed with him in the slightest. I think, at the start of the season,
he started
well, but he's really dropped off. Like,
I think
when was the last time he scored? Like, I don't think it's the fact that he's been found out. I just don't think that he's a very good striker. I just think he had a purple patch, and he's just not a very good striker because I don't see what he gives. Like, he's nothing like Isak.
Could
he reminds me of Calvert-Lewin, if anything.
I think he's best in the front 2 or just playing off the striker. I don't think on his own it works. Interesting. Okay. We'll have to see. But a lot of strikers even struggle at the minute. We talk about top strikers as well, and the likes of Erling Haaland is simply struggling. But Matt, if I can stick with you to move on to rivals, and this is why Newcastle fans will be so annoyed, not only if Sunderland have done the double over them, if anything, it's more likely to be the other way around before a ball's kicked. But Sunderland now actually sit a point above Newcastle, which will hurt Geordie supporters, including those in the chat. Sunderland, what have you made then of their season to sit in 11th? What have you made of it, Matt?
Do you know what, right? At the start of the season, they were incredible at home. They didn't lose a single game. And when my team went to play them at their ground, I was shocked from their performance because that was the first time in, I can't count how many years, since Luton away, where we got physically manhandled. We got absolutely ragdolled everywhere. It's not a nice place to go to, that stadium, because their fans are absolutely top. Their players put in every tackle. They don't leave anything on. I think that how the season has panned out, I think, has probably they're probably about where people thought they were going to be at the start of the season, because I didn't think that they would get relegated. I didn't think that they would finish top 10 either. So I think currently where they're at, I think their fans will be very, very happy. And I think that they're probably about where they deserve and where a lot of people have predicted them at the start of the season to be.
Got stuck again the button. No, thank you. I absolutely, totally agree with you. And, I think they deserve a lot of credit. And Ryan says, as much as I hate Sunderland, they deserve to win both derby games. So, fair play to you as a Newcastle fan for
Granit Xhaka, by the way, I've said this before, he's got to be signing of the season. He has to be, because without him, Sunderland would be going down. They probably would be taking Tottenham's place or West Ham's place, in that they would be going down, because he has just given them that fight, that fire, and sort of that pure leadership that they've needed. They've needed someone to pull the strings and to just, grab them, essentially.
Absolutely agree with that fully. Thank you. Louis, on Brighton then, I've been really impressed with them recently, and I actually think the fans are now behind Hertzler more than ever. I think because of the difficult period and coming out the other side, or you're kind of light through the end of the tunnel they've now found, I think anyway, they're now more united behind them because of that. So what have you made of Brighton? It's been a strange season. Again, talk about them with it being inconsistent. 1 minute there, I remember they were joint 5th at one point, and other times have been the kind of 15th and looking down below them. What do you make of them now?
I think Fabian Herzl is a fantastic manager. I think he's one of those managers that needs time to develop, and he's also managed to develop in a way that is not lingering around the bottom place, lingering around the relegation playoff sort of positions. He's managed to learn in the Premier League while still elevating Brighton. Brighton have got a fantastic model. They've got a great way of going about things. I know he had quite an expensive summer window, and their recruitment doesn't even need to be commented on. It's obviously brilliant. But I think Herzl himself has been super impressive. Brighton have needed someone to elevate their squad into a European fighting position. I personally wouldn't believe that their squad is exactly European quality, but that's not to say it can't achieve European football. I think the way he's managed to sort of bring up this Brighton squad in his own way, putting a player here, putting a player there, getting the most out of individuals, has put them in a position where they're about, off the top of my head, about 4 to 5 points away from a European position with coefficients in favour of England. So, again, I think they've been very impressive. If they were in a position where Crystal Palace were, you would have been a bit more disappointed. But given how their season's played out and there's still a few more games to go, definitely been impressive.
Okay, thank you very much. Do appreciate it, Louis. If I can stay with you and move on to Fulham, who've been ninth. I mean, Fulham fans to tell you as well that they're inconsistent. I think there's a recurring theme here for a lot of clubs. So, what have you made of it so far? Again, I'm very cautious not to speak about necessarily what's to come and save that for other episodes during this international break. But what have you made of them under Marco Silva? Because at times it looks like he's taken as far as he can get them, and other times it felt like they've really improved upon previous seasons.
Well, I think to put it bluntly is we need to look at the progression that Fulham have had. At the beginning of the season, we were thinking the general discussion in football was, should Fulham sack Marco Silva and could they be in for a relegation fight? That's what people were saying at the beginning of the season. Had a very, very, very rough start. But now we're talking about them fighting for a European place. On Marco Silva's contract, I'm not entirely sure. But what I can say is they've been majorly impressive. They're another side where they've managed to get the most out of their squad, given what they have. Obviously, they had some brilliant players. Kevin came in. Kevin's a top player. Unfortunately, he's injured. But again, another good player. Oscar Bob, great player. Potentially Ricardo Pepe as well coming in, depending on if that deal goes through. But my point being is they are signing players of that caliber to reach the next level, which, given where they are at the moment, I think is majorly impressive. Had they had a better start to the season, we would have been looking at probably where Brentford are, in a serious European contention place. That's not to say Fulham can't get it, but they would have been higher up in the table had they had a better start. So I do think they have been incredibly consistent, and sometimes you need luck on your side. I think Fulham have had quite a bit of luck, but that's not to say luck isn't skill. They've made their own luck this season, and they've got themselves in this position to fight for European football. So they deserve their applause.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Fulham fan in the chat, Barney. Good job he's here just in time. He says, we won promotion. Since then, we've been a consistent mid-table side. We have 2 points more than the Champions League paired to last season. We have had some great wins this season. Going on to say that Marco has got us playing gritty, but also expansive. But his one disappointment is the cup, saying that they lost to Southampton, which they did. Well, and that was his low point of the season. Yeah, fair enough. And also, last couple of years.
I do just want to say as well, Josh King, by the way, is a phenomenal footballing talent. Yeah, and I think that Fulham needed to be where they are right now in order to keep him. Because if they, were dropping to 14th, 15th, 16th, I do honestly think that he would probably leave. But the fact that they're going in a positive trajectory, I think he'll stay. He's a fantastic player. I love watching him.
Fulham have to keep in particular Josh King, but also the likes of Wilson, which would be really difficult. Harry Wilson, I'm talking about. Players like that for me are key. even for this season, keeping them fit is key if they want European football. Bonnie adds on your comment there saying that Josh King is outstanding and he'll be he'll be an international player soon, that's for sure. But Barney's also said that as for Europe, why not? We have to qualify it. We have the likes of Harry Wilson to stand out. He's absolutely right with that. But Matt, if I can come to you, Everton then are in 8th place. They've done a tremendous job, haven't they, really, under David Moyes to be in the position they are. I mean, a lot of people thought they'd be in the Championship not too long ago, but they're now absolutely thriving under a new manager and under new owners as well. So, yeah, what have you made of them so far? You've been impressed?
Impressive's not the word. I think I was expecting that with David Moyes. I was expecting to, see him make Everton hard to beat and, progress up the league table. And I think it says a lot about West Ham United that decided to part ways with him, because I don't think that they've been the same since Moyes. And I think, yes, even though that they played negative football, it was still getting results. You were still doing fairly well in the league, and he's a European winner. And that's not an easy feat. But genuinely, Everton, and I'm not being dramatic here, but I honestly think that they're going to get a Europa League football. I do. I just think that they're going to pit Chelsea to it.
I agree with you.
I mean, it's either Brentford or Everton that will pit Chelsea, in my opinion, and I think Chelsea will play Conference League football, because it's not so much the quality, but just the togetherness and the fight that those two teams have, and the fact that their fans are on side. There's no controversy or anything, like that. With Chelsea, there's massive protests about the ownership. There's so much divide in the fan base. Players don't want to be there. And with Everton and Brentford, you don't really see that. But yeah, that's my why I will take for the end of the season.
Interesting. All I will say is, in terms of what I'll take for the rest of the season, I think that the likes of Liverpool and Chelsea are going to continue to struggle until the very end. And I fancy a lot of clubs to close in on them, even if they're not going to overtake them. To be honest with you, I look at the likes of Fulham and Brighton. I think that gap is going to close quite a bit, and it's going to be really interesting towards the end. So for Liverpool and Chelsea, they have got to do better for sure. Louis, if I can come back to you, Brentford then in 7th place. What we've made of them this year, if we talk about their last 5, it hasn't been quite as positive. They've had just 1 win in that 5, only 1 defeat as well to add, because 3 have been draws. But do you still view them as a big contender for Europe, and have they really impressed you under Keith Andrews? Because I don't want to necessarily talk about that last 5 that I mentioned there. Talk about the season as a whole, because a lot of people thought this was the season that Brentford would go down after so many changes. It wasn't meant to be, was it, for Brentford? And they proved everybody, including myself, completely wrong.
100%. I mean, I reckon 75% of Premier League fans probably predicted them to go down. It just seemed everything was falling apart. And fair play to, as well as Keith Andrews, of course, I'll get on to him in a minute. We have to say fair play to the Brentford ownership. They are the ones who made the calls in the end. They helped sign the right players. They put Keith Andrews in the job. They backed him, whereas others might not have. And at the end of the day, they're the real winners here. They are doing so much better than anyone could have ever predicted. And Keith Andrews has come in as a new time manager and taken everyone by storm. I think he obviously still has a lot to learn, but that comes with time. That's not to say he can't learn it. That comes with time and experience. A bit like Brighton, which is what I was saying, is learning whilst at the top level. This is a level people didn't think Brentford could achieve, nor could they get. But they now find themselves here. But their most important thing now is, no, we weren't meant to really talk about the season so far, but it's all going to mean nothing for them if they don't get European football this year, because they keep punching and they keep going closer. For example, last year people thought they could get Europe, and this year, despite all of the changes, they've managed to build up on it. They've gone for it again, and they are so close now. They just need to keep that consistency they've kept throughout the entire season. blocking out smaller teams, blocking out the ones and taking the right moment of when a team is struggling and utilising it and getting those 3 points. For example, I remember there's been countless games where they've just got the goal and then taken control. They may have not done that against Wolves as of late. They probably would be disappointed about that. But across the entire season, they've been majorly impressive at getting that lead, keeping it and utilising it. So for sure, I think they'll be in this European hunt and it will go right down to the end.
And full credit to Brentford as well. I mean, you mentioned it there. They've lost over half of their coaching staff. They lost their manager they have for so many years in Thomas Frank, the likes of Norgard and Barmo, Visser. There's so many they lost and look even better than they did last year. But Louis, I do want to stick with you because Chelsea are the next club, and you spoke a lot about Liam Rosenior. Can you admit to be disappointed in what you've seen in the last few weeks? And what do you think about a little bit of pressure on him? Is that fair or not? I mean, I think you'll be in agreement with me that the problems do lie a lot deeper. But at the same time, I didn't think they'd fall to 6th and they could fall lower, when we get back going after the international break.
Of course, yeah, it's been majorly disappointing for them. I mean, we look at, they had Maresca and people started to understand that they were sort of building something. It takes a long time to build something under a manager, and it felt like they were beginning to grind their way through those olden gears. And then they decided to make the decision on New Year's, get rid of him and bring in Rosenior. And it's been disappointing, but I also think that, as you do mention there, the problems probably do lie a little bit deeper, and their transfer business keeps coming back to haunt them. It seems that every single window, we keep saying, fans keep suggesting, Chelsea fans, Premier League fans keep suggesting, we need a new defence, we need a new midfielder, we need a new striker, we need a new goalkeeper. There's only so many windows that can go by before you start to realise some other questions need to start being asked and being raised. Because why do you need everything every window when you're signing a surplus amount of players that don't even get used? I mean, for example, as a West Ham fan, Disasi has been absolutely brilliant for us. I mean, almost a star man since he's come in, and Chelsea refused to use him when they had him. And I obviously know the change of environment could be good and whatnot, but I think that is a big problem that not many managers will be able to solve, is the environment. It's very difficult for them right now. As mentioned with the Everton point, they don't have that harmony amongst the fan base. When you're having those good times and you've got the fan base behind you entirely, it helps the team. It boosts the team. We've seen it so many times before. There's so much unity going at Arsenal at the moment. That's exactly why they are succeeding above all. Bit ironic to say that they just lost final, but the truth is they are succeeding above all. So I do think that that's something that Chelsea lack.
Absolutely, Louis. Thank you, Matt. If I can move on then to the next club and speed it up a little now, is Liverpool. What have you made of them? Because they've been extremely disappointing, haven't they? They spent big, as to the likes of Arsenal and Man City. You can vouch that, I'm sure, as an Arsenal fan. But they spent big, and they walked the title last year. The only thing they're walking away from, is the Champions League battle. Because at the moment they've fallen away from that, and 10 defeats in the Premier League this season. That's an awful record if you go back to many, many years. So what have you made of them?
It's as clear as day. They've been the worst title defenders in Premier League history. They've absolutely fallen off a cliff from last season, and I actually think it's down to the squad and Arne Slot, in that the reason why they won last season was because Arne Slot walked into a team that was very, very complete and that had probably just 1 year of pure dominance left in them. And he took it with flying, with both hands, and he won the Premier League, and fair play to him. But I think it says more about the squad than it does him. And I think that this season, you've seen Arne Slot try and build his own squad, and it's really gone badly wrong. In Isak, fantastic signing, very unlucky with his injury. Hugo Ekitike, fantastic signing. Frimpong, waste of money, in my opinion. Kirkes, waste of money, in my opinion. Those two signings have been dreadful, in my opinion. Wirtz, look, I know that he's had some good performances, but we're talking 125, 135 million here. You know, like the expectation is you put in at least 8, 9 out of 10s per game with that amount of money spent on you. So I think he's been a flop as well. The only signing that I think has really impressed me is Shugo Ekitike, because he's been fairly consistent throughout the whole season, obviously up until now, but throughout the whole season, he's been very consistent. But it's been an absolutely disappointing season for Liverpool, and quite frankly, an embarrassing season, because they might not even get Champions League football. They might not even get Europa League football.
Matt, thank you. You're absolutely right to say that. Thank you. Louis, if I can ask you then about Aston Villa, because I don't know what it is with them about the start and end of the season. They seem to be awful, only good at the middle in terms of this season anyway. But it was 3 defeats in a row, but they ended that before the international break with a win in the Premier League. So that was key for them. They do currently sit fourth, but they've been a sinking ship, haven't they, really, Villa, and have now lost that third position.
I think they have, but I think people need to remember that these injuries that they've had have absolutely killed them, and they've
all in one
still
area
managed,
as well.
Yeah, more in one area, and they've still managed to hold on quite well. If we look at some other teams that suffered injuries and the fall-offs, they've managed to sort of get the best out they can of a bad situation. And again, they need this, for the terms of their wage structuring, the financial difficulties that they're having, being right on the edge every season. Getting Champions League football sort of gives them that break. I know there's been a lot of tension as of late with Emery, but they know that they need to go for those top 4 positions to at least sort of ease going into the summer, with potentially him staying, him getting what he needs in order to give Villa the best they can have. It's, again, another side that will come down right to the wire, but they've had a very impressive season. They've given it a real good go, and I think should they retain their squad, should they get top 4, they could be looking for a very good season next year as well.
100%, totally agree with you. Thank you very, very much. Louis, if I can stick with you though, Man United in third, talk to me about them. Different side under Michael Carrick. Was it right to make that managerial change?
It would be almost insane to say it wasn't. They were struggling immensely under Amorim, and it felt with Amorim it was inevitable at some point he would be sacked. Fans kept yo-yoing with what he had and didn't have. It got to the point where Man United made that call. They brought in Carrick, and look how it's turned out for them. Well, question is whether will he be there next season. We don't know, but they've looked very, very good. They're playing very free-flowing football, very attacking, entertaining, and they found a formula that's winning them games at the moment. So you can't complain. They're going to get top 4 back in European football. I'm sure everyone's happy.
100% that. Thank you very much. And Matt, I'm going to give you the final 2 clubs to talk about for obvious reasons. So Man City in second. Take the Arsenal, Arsenal think glasses off. What do you think of Man City? I know you can do that very easily, by the way. Let me add that and talk that bias. But what have you made of City? Because they seem to be really competitive, but not so much of late. And then, like Real Madrid, that first leg, I just don't think a City team of 2 or 3 years ago would have lost that humiliated. Wouldn't have gone to Spain and kind of had the backsides of hands to them like that. And they're not the same Man City team. And for a while, I thought, oh, okay, bringing in Gay and Semenyo solved all their problems. And in the last couple of weeks prior to the international break, that's the worst I've seen them for a long time.
I think what I will say on this Man City season is one player in particular. I think he's not finished as a footballer, but I think his Premier League days are slowly coming to an end, and that's Rodri. I think Rodri this season has shown to Pep, or the new manager, whoever that may be, to the club and to the fans, that injury might have killed his Premier League career. in terms of it might have just completely killed him off early, because he does not look the same player at all. He doesn't look like he can, go into challenges, with zero fear. He doesn't progress the ball, as much as he did, and he just doesn't look like the midfielder he was, that marauding midfielder that he was. And the signings that Man City have made this season, I actually think have been quite good. Cherky, look, he's a rival, but I absolutely love that player because he's probably the most technical, gifted Premier League player I've ever seen in my life. He is a joy to watch, and he's got a bit of shithousery as well, as we saw in the cup final against my team, which I didn't like. But Cherky has been the shining light for Man City. I think Haaland, I don't know what to make of Haaland. I don't think he's been found out. I just think that he's just having an off season. Players do that. I just don't think that he's firing, on all cylinders. And that may be because that their country, has just qualified for the World Cup. I think for the first time ever, or it's very rare that Norway do. And I think that he's just preserving his energy for that World Cup because it's something for his country that might never ever happen again in his playing career. But I've got to say, the signing that has made City as competitive as they are currently is Semenyo. People will say Mark Guéhi, but I don't know. I actually haven't been that impressed with Mark Guéhi personally. But Semenyo, I mean, I think he's got something like 10 GA already for Man City in the space of two months, which is just incredible, in the Premier League. And look, they were still in all 4 competitions. They were, but they came up against Real Madrid, and you're probably right, Harry. If this was a City team from last season, or from the season before, I don't think that they lose that. Real Madrid, I actually expected Man City to absolutely batter Real Madrid over 2 legs because I watched Real Madrid in the Champions League and I watched them in La Liga briefly, and they look really mid. They look really mid, but the one thing you can't take away from Real Madrid is they'll turn up in big Champions League nights, and they showed that. But with Man City, look, I feel that might be the only trophy they win this season. And we had to give Pep something. We had to give him something because he's going to be leaving at the end of the season. And I think that he's won a trophy for his final season. I think he can go out, on a happily ever after. It would be disappointing from his point of view and from the club's point of view if he didn't win anything. But he got that Carabao Cup. Yeah. He absolutely masterminded Mikel Arteta. And we'll get onto that later.
We will.
But yeah.
Thank you for admitting that as well. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't nice, but but sometimes I think that's what happened. I think the injuries, I'll be honest with you, I'll stick up for you here. Timber and Eze, I think losing them, and even like there's a weapon off the bench was huge, and the goalkeeper decision, he won't admit it, and I know why he done it, and a lot of managers would fall into that trap, but it was completely wrong. I think best team, and that means Raya included, get over the line, and when you've won the trophies, when you can say I've been there and done that, in the last couple of years, you could afford to give Kepa that game. I don't think it was right, whether Kepa likes it or not, considering his record as well in the Carabao Cup isn't great, at all, if we're being honest. But Matt, end and talk to us about Arsenal then. Don't predict what's to come, but what have you made of what you've seen so far? We'll have you on when we predict what's going to happen, don't worry.
At the start of this season, or heading into this season, we were sort of we can win the league, but I don't think we're going to win the league because of what we saw last season. But we actually started off quite meh in that we lost to Liverpool, we drew to Man City, and I think it was another result. But we actually didn't start off greatly, and Liverpool had built that gap. But I think that Man City game at the Emirates Stadium really changed a lot of things. With the way Pep played, we've never ever seen before, but also just that fight and resilience of we're not going to be getting beat here. And I think that changed something in that team, and we just ploughed through. We ploughed through results, and I think that Tottenham game gave us even more momentum. That Tottenham game couldn't have been more scripted ever. The fact that Eze bags a hat trick, and it was just perfect for him and for the club. And we've had our difficulties throughout this season. A lot of people don't talk about it because of how consistent we've been this season, but we've had a lot of injuries this season, and it's not something to brag about. We need to look into that again at the end of this season because, again, we've had a lot of injuries, and it needs to be looked into because this can't keep happening. We got Berta has assembled an incredible squad, and fair play to him. I think he's going to be the reason. Well, he's not going to be the reason, but his recruitment is going to be the reason why we win the league because of our squad depth. Like the players that we've signed: Noni, Gyökeres, Eze, Hincapié. There's probably another one, Norgard. These players have contributed over 50 goals and assists in all competitions, and to do that with 4 or 5 new signings is just incredible. And I think the one negative for us Arsenal fans is probably not the downfall, but just the season that Bukayo Saka has had output wise. I think if you're just looking on stats, he's been one of the best wingers in England. But if you're looking on pure goals and assist numbers, he's been really poor and really underwhelming. And
is he overrated?
Do you know what? I don't think he is. I think, if anything, he's becoming to be underrated because of the player that he can be and how consistent he's been for the past 5 years. I think he's becoming a bit underrated personally. I don't think as much respect has been put on his name. I think that might be down to the lack of major silverware that he has won. Hopefully that changes at the end of this season. And he can kickstart England's World Cup, dream. But a lot of positives this season. Zubimendi has been influential. He's probably been one of our most impactful signings that isn't an attacker. He complements Rice so well, and he just shores up quite a lot of our defense. He's very progressive as well, and he wins his duels as well. Considering how small he is and how slim he looks, he's been incredible. I think another negative would be Miles Lewis-Skelly and Ethan Nwaneri's development potentially. But then you can look at another positive in Max Dowman, who's just emerged, who's just every time that he plays, he's been the best player on the pitch, and he's so young, which is just incredible. And I think he actually got voted as 6th best teenage talent in the world or something. But overall, it could be a very, very special season. I'm not gonna say too much, but there's potential for it to be very, very special. I predicted that we were going to win the Premier League and the Carabao Cup. I didn't think that we would play the way we did in the Carabao Cup. And I do just want to touch upon the Carabao Cup really quickly as well, in that game showed why Pep Guardiola is one of the best managers of all time, in the way he instantly realized how he could beat Arsenal. Was in the first half, we actually did really well up until Hincapié got a yellow card, and then since then they kind of bullied us a little bit. But at half time, Pep noticed that Kepa can't do long passes. He only goes short. And what he did was, with his front three, he pressed us, but didn't press the goalkeeper. He pressed us up until the goalkeeping box. And he just let Kepa have the ball. Like, there was a 2-minute sort of scenario where Kepa was literally fake passing, fake rolling. He was trying to do everything he could to open up space. And there was a pass to Ben White that he didn't take, and that's something that Raya would have done. And I think that's the difference between a potential world-class goalkeeper and your backup goalkeeper. And Pep realised that, and he absolutely bullied us. And fair play to him, he absolutely deserved to win that game. We were shocking. But hopefully we can go to the Etihad and really get a bit of revenge and say, we're still the best team in the league.
Wow, absolutely. We'll see what happens come May. But Matt, thank you, and thank you to everyone that has listened. Really do appreciate it. Thank you to my two fabulous guests. Matt, where can people follow you on socials?
Just here on Twitter. Just here, AFC Matex with 2 X's.
Lovely stuff. And Louis, thank you very much for coming on. Tell people about how regularly as well that you come on the podcast, as you both do, and tell people about as well also how you feel about the rest of the season with West Ham.
Yeah, no, it's great to be on here and whatnot. I love it. It's brilliant, and I won't say much on West Ham because I don't want to tempt fate. So we'll just see how it goes.
I'll try to get you to jinx it here. I want you to jinx of it, Louis. Thank you very much. Thank you to both of you. Really do appreciate it. Thank you to everyone that's listened to this episode of the Scarfey Talks Premier League podcast. Big thanks to our support over on X. 96 followers now on the X page and lots of engagement. So it's been a huge week, and I've appointed an admin to work with me as well on the page. So I'm founder, host, and joint admin. It's been great. So thank you so much. And also as well, subscribers on here who are doing better than ever. So thank you very much. I think we're up to 86 subscribers again. So an increase of about 10, same as the X page. So thank you very much. Really good week. Do appreciate it. Keep coming over. Keep having your say. It's a Premier League podcast for everybody. Fans of all Premier League clubs, all welcome on. Drop me an email, scarfharry323@gmail.com if you want to come on, or drop me a message, DM, whatever, at Harry Scarfe or at Scarfey Talks Premier League. Thank you very much. For now, have a good one. Cheers.